Welcome again to the Construction CPA Podcast. Today we're being joined by Mandi Kime with AGC. Mandy, why don't you go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about you and your background and your journey so far?
Okay. Wow, where to start? I got into safety primarily because my dad was a safety director for a general contractor for a number of years. And I really did think that it was going to be the easiest job in the world because people don't wake up in the morning and go, yep, feel like I want to get hurt today. So I was like, oh, this is great. And then the more that I studied safety, especially as I got into college, I realized how much science and how much thought goes into the safety rules and regulations that we live with, and frankly, how many ways workers get injured. And I didn't think that I would end up in construction, but I have to say that that is one of the biggest blessings of my professional career is to get the opportunity to work with construction professionals. I have long said I think that construction personnel at all ranks are some of the best and brightest individuals out there. My grandfather was a contractor. He was somebody that I looked at as larger than life, could fix anything, could design anything, and I'm just really motivated to help those individuals with their career in construction and keep them in construction. And so I've had a lot of opportunities to do that, whether it's through getting my master's degree. I wrote my master's thesis on mental health and suicide prevention interventions for construction employers because I learned about the statistics on mental health in our industry and realized that I'm uniquely poised with my 20 plus years of construction safety experience to help employers tackle this in a way where it's not only impactful, but it also helps individuals feel seen and heard. I was one of the co-authors of the AGC Culture of Care program, where we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness. And again, it's an opportunity for me to put my skill set to work, to not only recruit people into our industry and help show them that there's a lifetime of achievement that can be accomplished working in construction, but that also we have the opportunity to retain that talent and help them live good lives on the job and outside of work and feel fulfilled. And that is the kind of stuff that really keeps me waking up in the morning and wanting to show up for work.
Awesome. So you mentioned that you learned about mental health statistics and that's what drew you to the field. Where did you come across the statistics?
So my good friend and mentor, Cal Bayer, he has been a cultural change agent in our industry for quite some time and has really focused on mental health, suicide prevention, substance use disorder prevention for construction. He came to me over 10 years ago and presented this idea of, you talk about safety and health, you talk about physical safety on the job, but we have some problems with regard to these issues, and it would be nice if we dedicated a forum to it. And I remember at the time thinking, man, this is going to be controversial. And I'm going to have some people that are going to say things like, oh, this isn't the place or the time for these kinds of conversations. And I did it anyway. And what I learned from that process is not only did we have a number of construction professionals that were suffering from their own mental health challenges, but also we had a lot of people showing up to work that were caring for people in their immediate circle who were suffering, and they just needed tools. And one of the things that I've seen through this work, whether it's from writing my thesis or implementing a best practices guide or training people all over the country on this, is we have a heart for this. Construction personnel want to do the right thing. They just need an appropriate roadmap. They need somebody to tell them how to dip their toe in this pond and have these conversations and make an impact. But there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of stigma, and people are frankly afraid to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing that might have a catastrophic impact on someone else. And so it's been my passion project to really delve into ways to make it easier for employers and leaders in the industry to have impact here. And frankly, not long after I got started in this realm of mental health, my own child had a mental health crisis. And I learned firsthand how difficult it is to navigate the system here in our country, how challenging it can be as a parent to love somebody through a crisis and do right things and advocate for them all at the same time that you're going through something really impactful personally. And so that fueled my fire probably even more.
Definitely a personal connection there. So I definitely see your passion. Um, it's pretty interesting. So tell me, you mentioned that your grandfather was a contractor as well. Did you also say that your dad was?
Yeah, my dad worked for a general contractor, heavy civil builder, and my grandfather actually worked for that same heavy civil builder, and then moved on to a different contractor. And there was literally nothing my grandfather couldn't build or fix. So it was pretty impressive.
So in terms of like, I guess the generational difference between then and say now and just the industry, are there any connections you see in like mental challenges that people may have suffered from then and now, but maybe were less inclined to speak up about then as opposed to now that they wish something like this would have been around?
Yeah, I think there's been market improvement in that area. I think, you know, COVID didn't do us a lot of favors, right? It was not a good time for anyone. But I think that one of the things that it did for all of us is it made it a level playing field in the fact that we all got accustomed to acknowledging where we weren't okay and realize that it's okay to say that you're not okay. And I think culturally in construction, what I've seen change is more willingness to have these conversations and more willingness to be open than maybe we've had in the past. Culturally, we have a long history of machismo and check your feelings at the gate, rub some dirt in it, walk it off, and other more colorful ways to say those things to each other. And we also have a very large percentage of our workforce that are males and a large
Hmm.
percentage of our workforce that are veterans. And those are really some of our prime demographics of folks that we see struggle and suffer. And so I think it's refreshing to see a lot more conversation about this, and see a lot more people willing to engage on those struggles in a more proactive and positive light rather than just being like, hey, I don't care that your wife left you, or I don't care that, your mom's battling cancer, or, whatever your problem is. Now we're willing to, just like we do if there's an accident, wrap our arms around each other and try to take care.
Right. So traditionally, when we think about safety in construction, we think about hazards on the job site, right? So how does psychological safety play into even safety on the job site?
Yeah. I think it's first important to acknowledge that there are a lot of psychological stresses that our workforce endures from the cyclical nature of our work. We've got this feast or famine thing, right? That happens a lot in construction where there's some months where we're wildly busy and other months where we're not so much busy. We've got travel. We've got the struggles that come from that cyclical nature of the work, whether it's financial struggles or, being away from your family or the odd hours of work. And then you couple that with some of the workplace culture issues that still exist and communication barriers that we have. So there's a lot of factors at play here, and it's not just personal factors that somebody might be enduring, whether they're going through a hard time or something like that personally. There's also just a lot of things that are woven into the nature of how we do our work. And that being said, the biggest physical risk to all of that is when you're going through all of that and you're processing that, and it's a difficulty to you and a distraction to you. You bring that distraction with you everywhere you go. And I talk about this a lot in the safety trainings that I do. Is I'm Mandi, and the struggles that Mandi has outside of work they don't magically go away just because I'm at work. They don't magically go away
Exactly.
just because I have a job to do. Each individual has these unique challenges. I myself have struggled with mental health issues from anxiety, PTSD, and postpartum depression. And those things didn't just magically get packaged away into a neat little corner in a box for me to access only when convenient for work and or for my personal life. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that, because that stress and that distraction carries over into the tasks that we do. It carries over into the way that we communicate with our team. It carries over into the relationships that we're able to build or not able to build, because we're kind of buried by these other things going on inside. And I think the harder part about the psychological risks as compared to a physical risk that you can see and measure and create a plan for in the workplace, the psychological stresses are internal. So I can't look at you and say, I know all the things that you're struggling with. Just like you can't look at me and say the same thing. And so it is important to acknowledge that psychological stresses exist. It's important to acknowledge that every single human being, it's part of the human condition. We don't get through a life on this planet without having those factors play a part in what we do. And as soon as we can acknowledge that and state like openly that this is a normal thing, it's not bad, it's normal, everyone has it, and then start treating people with the dignity that we all deserve, for whatever psychological stresses we may have, I think everybody gets better.
Yeah, so when you started with the AGC, did you get right into helping with resources for psychological safety for mental health, or was there another path and then you transitioned?
Yeah, so I have actually worked for AGC 3 different times in my career, which is unique.
You're a lifer.
I am. I'm like a moth to a flame, I say. I think this time is going to stick. But yeah, so I did my internship with AGC, one of my internships in college with AGC, doing field services. Then when I graduated several months later, I was given an opportunity to apply for and was accepted to be their safety coordinator. And so I did a lot of field services. I worked with contractors, and my primary role in that capacity was to go out on the job and look for physical risk factors and pair that with resources for the employers. I left for a period of time. I worked for an electrical contractor and a telecommunications contractor as their safety director, again, managing programs for them, managing, all things related to compliance for both companies. And then an opportunity presented itself actually while I was pregnant with my oldest child. Opportunity presented itself for me to come back to AGC as the director of safety services. And so I've been in that capacity since 2007, so a long time. A very long time.
Awesome.
And
Very awesome.
I've worked on regulations and all of that stuff, and I would say that the mental health and psychological safety and inclusion work has really been more of the last 10 years.
Good. What are some of the resources that AGC has?
So in 2021, I finished my master's degree and wrote a thesis on mental health best practices. I knew instantaneously employers weren't going to read a 50-page thesis. I mean, I wrote the thing and I didn't even want to read it. So, I broke that down into a best practices guide. So it really highlights the 8 best practices. I published that, and I went to AGC of America to their national safety conference, and I said, this is really important, and I'd really like to present this at this conference and really start helping employers address these issues. They embraced it. After my session, it was just an overwhelming number of people that came up just singing the praises of the work that we were doing, and AGC of America for allowing me to present at that conference. And so I challenged AGC of America with one of my colleagues, Brandon Anderson at AGC of Missouri, to start a committee or task force on this issue. And so we started that in January of 2022. Since that time, we have published a website on AGC of America's platform. And the primary goal of that is just that it is free and open source resources for employers. Anything that that we've found that is helpful, we publish there. We've done some high impact videos. We're developing supervisor training in this regard. And the task force is also doing other things, like we created an ambassador program. So we have people sprinkled all throughout the country that are paying attention to these issues, bringing that information back to us with feedback, kind of like a living, breathing gap analysis of them going out and seeing where are we missing the mark, what resources don't exist, what needs to be developed. And so that, I would say, is probably one of the more powerful things that we've done, is just try to remove barriers and create a one-stop shop. If an employer, someone from any construction employer, showed up to work today and said, you know what, I think today's the day I want to tackle some stuff on mental health, that we have a place for them to go that is going to address whatever entry point they want to start at, because there are so many different entry points to these conversations, and the culture at company A is going to be different than the culture at company B. And so we want to allow employers to come and take a look at the resources and see what resonates with them as an individual who wants to champion this effort, but also what resonates within the culture of their organization, what they think is going to be the easiest or quickest. And what I challenge people to do is, don't try to bite the whole apple. Pick one thing, deploy it within your organization, see how it goes. And then from there, you can kind of assess what are next steps, because there's no prescriptive roadmap or one way to do this. There's a lot of different ways.
Tell me more about that. How does a company's culture maybe influence the path that they take in terms of the way they use the resources?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I hear most often from employers who come to sessions where I'm speaking or attend one of these, national forums is, well, I just don't know if my team is really going to be receptive to this, or I don't know if this is going to fit with what we're already doing with regard to safety or this or that. And my response to that is, frankly, you don't know until you try. And you'd be really surprised how often you start something and you get an overwhelming response. And so I stress to people, first and foremost, be prepared. Be ready for the fact that you're going to have these conversations. You're going to have more people come forward that probably are having struggles or want more resource. And so be prepared. Don't start and be like, ooh, we're going to do mental health training, and then not have tools and resources. So be ready with the toolkit, and AGC of America's got all of that on their website. So there's a wealth of resources there. However, I think that also a lot of people are fearful in having these conversations because they're afraid of the pushback that they might get from people on their teams. And so I would say that when that pushback happens, one of the strongest tactics that you can use with people who are resistant is, first of all, reminding them, and this is true of inclusion work, this is true of everything, is reminding them that they're as much of a critical player in all of this as anyone else. If you're resistant to this, I need to hear from you. What is your resistance? Because that's valuable to me. But also, you have the power as someone who is resistant to this messaging to still help us tackle this issue. And furthermore, to remind folks as you're having these conversations that it may not resonate with them. It may not be something that they struggle with. But in any room that I've ever been in, when I've asked about mental health struggles or substance use disorder struggles, if they've ever experienced loss due to those, or they've ever known someone who has struggled, universally, there's not a hand in the room that doesn't go up. We've all had someone in our circle, regardless of how close, that has struggled with mental health challenges, that's struggled with substance use disorder. And so some of this is about equipping us as human beings to be better for them, So if this doesn't resonate with you as an individual, it's not a struggle that you have, or you think that this isn't a workplace issue, it is. And the stats don't lie. I mean, here in my own state in 2020, we lost 16 construction workers. Of those 16 construction workers that died on the job, 6 of them were mental health related. We had 3 on the job suicides and 3 on the job drug overdoses. That's one state in 1 year. And you can't tell me that that doesn't have a long-term impact to every other human being that works on that job site, that has to keep showing up every day knowing that their friend passed away from a drug overdose or passed away from suicide on the job. So the issue is here. It's happening on our jobs. It's happening in our workplaces, and we can't turn a blind eye to it anymore. So we need everybody's input, especially those who are most resistant, because those are the ones that will hopefully end up helping us drill those messages better.
Yeah. What aspect of a construction company is most vulnerable to employees that may have issues with dealing with mental challenges?
I think that there's a lot of pros and cons to the nature of how we perform our construction work, right? The fact that there's a divide between field and office can sometimes feel challenging, but also, we may have people in leadership who have a profound amount of care with regard to mental health, but unfortunately, it also takes field leadership to be on board with this messaging. It takes field leadership that's bold and vulnerable enough to lead in that regard. And this is not to be critical of our field leaders, because frankly, our field leaders carry most of the burden of what we do. If you really think about it, we come up with great ideas in the office and great policy, and then we turn around and we send it on down the line and we send it to our field leaders and we say, okay, this is our new policy, go forth and lead, right? And so there's a lot of pressure on our field leadership to manage schedule and budget and manpower and equipment and all these different aspects of the work that we do. And now we're saying, and oh, by the way, take care of everyone's mental health as well. And so I would say that that's our biggest vulnerability, is really, have we equipped those field leaders to be at their best and brightest in this regard? Do they have the tools and resources? But also, have we given them the support that they need to protect their own psychological safety as they're managing all of these things for us? And that's really critical. And that's one of the things, like I mentioned earlier, AGC of America is working really hard on some supervisor training so that we can really bridge that gap and help our field leadership truly understand how important they are to this process, but also, because of how important they are, how necessary it is for them to protect their own psychological safety, how important it is for them to lean on resources that exist specifically for them, and how they can properly engage on these issues without worrying about fear of reprisal. They don't have to worry about the HR side of things of, if I engage on this, am I going to create a problem for our company, or create a problem for that worker, or create a problem for our team? We want to equip those leaders to do their best work in this regard, but also to feel like they're supported in doing that work, and that it's not just another thing that started in some office somewhere that we're shoving down their throat and expecting them to work miracles.
Got it. Yeah. So as we're speaking, and we're talking about psychological safety and just mental health, I also wanted to touch base on that connection between having healthy workers and a company's bottom line. Can you bridge that gap?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's one resource out there that's really important, the National Safety Council, nsc.org. They have some cost calculators on their website that talk through the financial impact of mental health and the financial impact of substance use disorder in the workplace, and those numbers are staggering. You can actually put into those calculators details about where you're performing the work, how big your workforce is, et cetera, et cetera. And it'll really drill down for you of the true financial impact. And I think that it's really important to note that, we as employers, we can't fix all of this for a worker, but we certainly can create a workplace that is more psychologically safe, that we can impact their desire to show up for work every day just by, being aware of what our workers may be facing and making sure that they have access to the resources that exist for their benefit. To that end, mental health challenges impact us in a lot of ways that are not as measurable, right? We'll have more absenteeism. We'll have more presenteeism, where they're there, but their mind's not there. They're not doing their best work. They're not fully engaged in the work, or maybe it's creating personality conflicts. And all of those things lead to lower quality work product, which means we end up doing rework, which means, and it's a proven fact that when we're doing rework, we're at a higher risk of injury because we're not following the original plan, right? So we're off script, and as soon as we're off script, then weird stuff happens. And so if we can keep people present, and keep folks feeling supported and feeling psychologically safe, they're less likely to make the mistake in the first place, which means that we're less inclined to have to go back and do rework. We're less inclined to have the risks associated with that. But also, you think about anytime you onboard somebody into your organization, you spend a considerable amount of time and money getting them up to speed. And if we have created an environment where they leave, or we lose them to substance use disorder or suicide, that is a wealth of knowledge and investment that's gone. You don't get to tap that resource anymore. And not to mention the fact that we still have a skilled worker shortage. So as we face issues like this, that's going to be one of our keys to recruitment and retention. But it's also a key to how, from a generational perspective, we have people that have longevity in our industry that have a ton of knowledge, and we need to keep them as long as we can so that they can share that knowledge to the future generations on how we solve problems, how we fix stuff, how we build stuff, all of those things. That all goes away if we don't have a workplace where people feel seen and supported.
Exactly. Exactly. When we spoke before, you mentioned that one of the things that you wanted to see was more of a speak up culture. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I think speak up really gets some people's hackles going. And so I want to be clear that what I'm saying is we want to create a culture where folks feel comfortable to bring their diversity of thought, their diversity of experience to the table. But also, if you look at safety and health, we tell people in orientation programs all around the country, you have stop work authority. So if you see something wrong, if you see something bad, please stop work. But I challenge people to think about that. When you're saying that to a first or second year apprentice and you say you have stop work authority, what does that feel like to them? Does that feel like a gotcha? Does that feel like, oh yeah, sure, I have stop work authority, but as soon as I exercise that and I tell, my journeyman or my supervisor that this doesn't look right, they're gonna razz me, or they're gonna shame me for bringing that up? Or have we really created a culture where we actually thank people for speaking up and catching things? So it's like rewarding and acknowledging that effort and that bravery that it takes to say something, instead of just saying, oh, we've got this stop work authority, so anybody can stop work if they feel like it's not safe, or we've told people that if they think somebody's in crisis, what to do, so it's going to be handled.
Not good enough.
Yeah, it takes a lot of bravery to handle those things, right? If somebody comes to you and says they're in crisis, if we haven't equipped them on what to do and how to navigate that, we've not done our job.
what would you like to see changed?
Um, I want to start by just saying how proud I am of our industry. If you look at construction as a whole and what we're doing with regard to mental health and a lot of other industries, we are leading the pack. Our industry is doing good work. So I don't want to diminish the great work that has happened. But I would say I think that we need leaders in the industry to be willing to be boldly vulnerable. And I think I see that as a gap. And what I mean by that is looking at people that are in positions of leadership who not only represent who we are, but are willing to be open about their struggles. That is so powerful. Having a leader that says, I have struggled with substance use disorder, and this is how I got help, and this is how my life got better. Or I have struggled with mental health issues, and this is what I did about it, and here was my pathway. Not only are you presenting people with hope and options, you are helping people see that everyone struggles, that everyone has issues, but also they see then that oh, I have anxiety and our superintendent has struggled with anxiety. So I could still be successful as a superintendent while managing this personal issue that I have. And so, it's all great to have a mental health speaker come in and, rally everyone and get everyone excited. But what I would love to see is a lot more construction leaders sharing that part of their story. Because all too often as a society, as a culture, even as an industry, we want to celebrate someone's strength and we want to celebrate what's gone right for them. But every single person that has had things go right for them, that's in a winning spot, has also seen dark days. And so if we can get those individuals to be willing to be bold and brave, but also vulnerable, how powerful that would be, how impactful that is to a frontline, early career professional that sees that and says, I see myself in that individual. I see that there's hope for me. I see that there's a path for me. Like that is incredibly powerful.
Incredibly powerful. I agree, Mandy. Okay, cool. Um, in terms of the AGC, what's next?
So, um, so much is next. That's the beauty of having a task force and a lot of great minds from different places and different backgrounds trying to tackle this issue. Our focus for the future is really we're past awareness. I think that everyone in the world can acknowledge that mental health is a challenge for all of us as a society right now. That's not new. That's not news. It's here. We realize it. So we're trying to move away from awareness and more into upstream intervention. Moving into what are the root causes? What are the contributing factors? What are the reasons why someone might experience a struggle, whether it's a long-term mental health struggle or a short-term conditional situation. There's a lot of different things that contribute to someone being in crisis. And so that's our focus. Let's get upstream. Let's catch people before they need to call 988 and get emergency services. Let's catch them and give them better coping and resilience strategies. Let's teach them better communication. Let's teach them how to manage their finances better so they're not going to have a financial, surprise that completely upends their whole life. Those kinds of things. How are we managing chronic pain? How are we avoiding someone heading down a path of substance use disorder simply because, they have this ache or pain and the next thing you know, it devolves into an addiction. So that's where we're headed. I think that there's a lot of spokes to the wheel, let's say. There's a lot of different ways that we're going to try to tackle those things, whether it's resources, forums, and materials for employers to use for training. But it really goes hand in hand with a lot of the work that goes on relative to total worker health, is acknowledging that we're all human beings and there's a complexity that's just nature of being a human. And so we've got to treat people as whole humans, not robots that show up for these many hours a day to do ABC and then go home. So I think that's what's next. I think that there's going to be a lot of different ways that we tackle that, because not all of these things are easy fixes, right? If they were easy, we would have already been doing them.
No, exactly. Exactly. And as you speak, I'm just thinking, and I know the AGC works with the construction industry, but people across all spectrums, all industries can benefit from these resources.
Absolutely. Yep. I when I wrote my master's thesis and best practices guide, the core tenets in there are applicable to anyone. They're applicable to any workplace, and my hope is that all employers start doing this. And but frankly, my hope is that the work that we do as a task force on this and the effort that we're putting in really puts us out of the need to have a task force like this, right? That we do such a good job of tackling this, and we get upstream and we start really embracing each other's humanity and coming up with good resources that you don't need a mental health task force anymore.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good North Star to have to be a guiding light, if you will. Anything you want to leave the people with? Any takeaways?
I think that the only thing that I really try to impart frequently is that we may not be able to solve our entire company's cultural challenges or mental health challenges or any of these things. As one individual, we may not be able to impact all of that, but we do have the power to be that person for others if they're struggling. And the best way to do that is equip yourself with knowledge. Go, check out websites, take a mental health assessment for yourself, know where you stand before you delve into this. And then just be willing to be that person that asks somebody how their day is and stay stationary long enough to hear the response. Instead of that, hey, how you doing, as we walk past each other, it's the
I'm fine.
yeah, right, I'm okay, or living the dream, or whatever the nonsense response that we all give. But to genuinely ask that question with intention and stick around for the answer. I think we all have the power to do that. And when I did my research, one of the resounding themes that I learned in reading about people that had attempted suicide is many of them just said, if just one person had acted like they cared genuinely about me and was willing to ask me why I was so distraught, or, offer just to listen to me, how much different that outcome would have been for me, and so we all have our own struggles. We all have a lot on our plate. So it's not to say that we have to go out on a mission of doing this every day, but your people. Your people well enough to ask that question. And if somebody comes across as not doing okay for whatever reason, you don't have to own it, but you can certainly help. You can offer resources. You can call 988 with them. You can make a referral internally to your company, but we all have the power to be that one person.
Awesome. And where can we find AGC's resources?
So if you go to agc.org and you click on the upper tab that says safety or industry priorities and then safety, the very first tab that pops up on the AGC website under safety is mental health. And I would just encourage people, go check that out, and create a roadmap that you feel comfortable with. Not everything is going to resonate with you, but pick something you can do within your sphere of influence. Start with that.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Mandy. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I think that this will be very powerful and a lot of people will be able to get help.
I hope so. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.